My name is Lauren Wilson, and I never thought my marriage would end with an Instagram video. It was a Thursday evening when I scrolled through my feed and froze. There it was, my husband's brand new condo. The one he swore was just a temporary investment, glowing under warm designer lights. But it wasn't David who appeared on the screen. It was Chloe Carter, a 28-year-old interior designer turned lifestyle influencer with 50,000 followers. She was twirling in a silk dress, holding a glass of champagne, and telling the world, "Welcome to my new sanctuary." The condo wasn't hers. I knew it. The deed was filed under David's name. We were supposed to be saving every cent for Greenvolt Mobility, the company he built and guarded like a child. But instead of expanding his startup, he had handed Chloe a luxury stage to broadcast her curated life. Within hours, the video had spread across social media. The comment section exploded. People congratulating her, others asking who financed such a stunning space. She played coy, smiling into the camera, brushing her hair off her shoulder like she had just conquered Los Angeles. The truth burned hotter than any fire. That condo was paid for with Greenvolt money. I knew because I had reviewed the closing documents myself. And now the whole city was looking at Chloe's little performance, oblivious to the fraud playing out in real time. My husband, David Wilson, 37, CEO of Greenvolt, had gambled everything on a woman who thought hashtags and filters could cover up the truth. The scandal didn't need my hand to ignite. Twitter lit up within minutes. Reporters pulled property records, cross-checked names, and discovered David's signature stamped on the deed. Articles went live before midnight. Greenvolt CEO linked to secret luxury condo. By the morning, David's investors were forwarding screenshots to each other, questioning where their money had gone. Chloe's video was everywhere, replayed on news channels with headlines that stung like open wounds. I watched in silence, my coffee cooling in my hand. There was no need to shout, no need to cry. David and Chloe had set the stage themselves, and the curtain was rising without mercy. Margaret Wilson, my mother-in-law, always loved to remind me that appearances were everything. Now appearances were about to bury them alive. David thought he could hide behind charm, behind contracts written in vague terms, behind nights spent away from home that he disguised as business trips. But every lie leaves a paper trail. And Chloe's vanity had given the world a front-row seat. I didn't have to imagine what would come next. Scandals in this city don't fade quietly. They spread, they multiply, and they consume. So I sat back, letting the storm roll in. My name wasn't in the headlines yet. That was the beauty of it. For now, it was David and Chloe under the spotlight. And all I had to do was wait for the world to demand answers. The morning after Chloe Carter's video spread like wildfire, I sat at my desk with a calm that surprised even me. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was simply opening folders. Being a corporate lawyer has its advantages, especially when you've shared a life with someone careless enough to think his secrets were beyond reach. David Wilson believed charm and half-truths could hide his tracks. But contracts, receipts, and financial records never lie. I began with the company's credit card statements. Greenvolt Mobility had been growing fast, and David often used business accounts for expenses he claimed were tied to networking. That word, networking, was his favorite excuse. I traced charges from the past 6 months. There they were, transactions at a luxury furniture store in West Hollywood. More than $20,000 for items described vaguely as consulting furniture. I remembered the couch in Chloe's video. A curved Italian piece with fabric so rare, the price alone could pay a semester at law school. Now I had proof the condo wasn't just his personal indulgence. It was financed through the company, under the pretense of development expenses. Next, I reviewed internal emails. I still had access through our shared home network. A slip David had never thought to fix. In one thread, David's assistant confirmed wire transfers labeled as R&D consultant fees. The recipient wasn't a consultant at all. It was Chloe Carter's personal design company. A shell entity she had set up to run her influencer side business. Attached invoices looked professional on the surface. But every lawyer knows to look for inconsistencies. The formatting didn't match standard Greenvolt vendor contracts. And the tax ID number linked directly to Chloe's name. Piece by piece, the puzzle was fitting together. David had disguised his affair not just as romance, but as business. He used investor funds to create a stage for Chloe, turning her into the face of a luxury life, while Greenvolt's engineers fought for grant money to keep projects afloat. I needed more than numbers. Scandals don't explode without visuals. That was where Chloe's vanity handed me the key. Her Instagram feed was a gallery of incriminating evidence. She had tagged the condo's location once by accident, showing off a skyline view only visible from that specific building in downtown Los Angeles. From there, I pulled the property records public information, filed under David Wilson's name. I didn't have to hack anything. I simply searched, downloaded, and printed his signature, dated 3 months ago, stared back at me from the deed. With each document, each screenshot, I built a file the way I would for any corporate dispute. Organized tabs, chronological order, cross-references. But this wasn't just about proving an affair. It was about exposing fraud. If David used company money to fund Chloe's condo, Greenvolt's investors and the IRS would care far more than I ever could. By noon, I had 3 binders full, one of credit card records, one of wire transfers, one of property deeds and Chloe's social media posts. I added notes, highlighting connections, circling dates that matched suspicious withdrawals. I wasn't rushing. I was deliberate, methodical. The next step was choosing where to release it. Going to David directly would only end with excuses and empty promises. Margaret Wilson, my mother-in-law, would try to bury it with her gallery's connections. No. This needed to go where cover-ups die. I drafted 2 packets. The first went to a financial journalist known for exposing corporate misconduct. The second went to the IRS whistleblower office. Both were sent electronically. Timestamped. Traceable. Undeniable. When I finally closed my laptop, the condo scandal was no longer just an embarrassing rumor. It was evidence of financial misconduct tied directly to the CEO of a fast-growing company. The world already knew Chloe was flaunting a condo she didn't own. Soon, they would know who paid for it. And how? I leaned back in my chair, breathing in the silence of my apartment. The storm outside had only begun. But my part was done. Scandals don't need shouting to spread. They need truth, carefully placed where it can't be ignored. David and Chloe had given me the spark. I had just handed the world the fuel. 2 days after Chloe Carter's condo video made its way from gossip blogs to financial news outlets, my phone rang. The name flashing across the screen was Margaret Wilson, my mother-in-law. Her timing was predictable. Margaret thrived on appearances, and nothing threatened her polished image more than scandal in her family. Her voice cut through before I could say hello. She demanded that I stop whatever I was doing, that I rein in the story spreading through the press. She insisted that Greenvolt's reputation was still salvageable if I kept quiet. I could almost picture her standing inside her art gallery in Pasadena, surrounded by glass cases and polished marble floors, speaking with the same authority she used on donors and clients. But behind the practiced elegance was fear. Margaret had tied her gallery to Greenvolt's fortune. She had taken donations, arranged exhibitions, and quietly funneled company money into her projects. For years, she dismissed me as the lawyer who married her son, someone she thought belonged in the background. Yet now she was calling me, her tone sharp, accusing, but laced with desperation. I listened without interrupting, letting her lecture me about loyalty, about family honor, about sacrifices she claimed she had made to build the Wilson name. I didn't remind her of the countless times she told David he deserved someone more glamorous than me. I didn't remind her of the dinners where she introduced me as David's wife without ever saying my name. What mattered now was that Margaret's gallery was vulnerable. She had accepted Greenvolt funds under the guise of corporate sponsorship. A detail that would look far less innocent under an IRS audit. I had already placed the documents where they needed to be. The same binders that exposed Chloe's condo also connected to Margaret's gallery. Transfers labeled as philanthropy support linked Greenvolt accounts to the Wilson Foundation, then directly to the gallery's renovation budget. The trail wasn't long or complicated. It was straightforward, like a string waiting to be pulled. When Margaret finished her tirade, I answered quietly. My words were measured. Not angry, but firm. I told her she had built her life on image, and now image would undo her. If she wanted silence, she had chosen the wrong person. There was nothing left to hide. That afternoon, the first reports appeared. Local journalists noted that Greenvolt contributions to the gallery spiked in the same months David's company reported losses. Tax experts speculated live on television about conflicts of interest. Margaret's picture, once used for charity galas and glossy magazine profiles, was now next to headlines asking whether the Wilson name was built on art or fraud. I didn't celebrate. I simply observed. Margaret had spent years reminding me that I was not enough for her son, that I lacked the pedigree she wanted in her family. Now her own pedigree was under scrutiny, her gallery's reputation collapsing as donors withdrew support. The building that once held champagne receptions and whispered praise was closing its doors to investigators. The calls came again that night. Margaret's voice was no longer commanding. It was frantic, pleading. She asked me to intervene, to speak to the press, to remind people of the gallery's cultural contributions. I let her talk, and when she finished, I told her calmly that truth had its own weight. No one could silence it. Not her. Not David. Not Chloe. I hung up and set my phone down. For the first time in years, Margaret needed me more than I needed her. The gallery lights in Pasadena would dim. The Wilson family name would carry not prestige, but scandal. And I had not raised my voice once. When the headlines about the gallery started circulating, I knew the time had come to move from exposure to execution. Public scandal had cracked the surface, but financial power was the foundation that kept David Wilson standing. To end him, I had to dismantle that foundation piece by piece. I still held a significant block of Greenvolt shares, the result of years of being by his side when the company was just an idea scribbled on napkins. David had always told me those shares were meaningless. That real influence came from the CEO seat he occupied. But in the corporate world, ownership speaks louder than titles. With investors panicking and Greenvolt's reputation collapsing, those shares could decide the company's future. I scheduled a quiet meeting in my office downtown. Henry Mason, CEO of Mason Energies and David's longest rival, sat across from me. He didn't need convincing. Greenvolt's fall was Mason's opportunity, and I was offering him the key. The negotiations were swift, clinical. My folders were organized, contracts reviewed, signatures exchanged. When the final document was stamped, Henry Mason held controlling influence in Greenvolt. My role in the company was finished, but my position as the architect of David's undoing was only beginning. The sale triggered an immediate shift. Word spread through the market, and within hours, Greenvolt's valuation plummeted further. Investors dumped their shares. Knowing Mason's takeover meant David's removal, by the end of the week, the board called an emergency meeting. David was stripped of his authority. No longer the visionary founder, but a liability whose recklessness had poisoned the brand. While Greenvolt unraveled, another thread of the plan unfolded. The condo that Chloe Carter flaunted on Instagram had been the spark. Now it would become the symbol of collapse. Investigators moved quickly once the paper trail reached their desks. The condo was tied directly to Greenvolt funds, categorized as business assets misused for personal gain. It didn't matter how Chloe decorated it or how many followers she convinced that it was hers. The government didn't care about filters or hashtags. To them, it was evidence. When the notice came, the condo was frozen under investigation. Chloe returned from a weekend trip to Palm Springs to find officials posting orders on the glass doors. Her showroom, her backdrop, her dream of being an influencer who lived in quiet luxury, was gone overnight. Without the condo, her brand crumbled. Sponsors backed away. Followers mocked her in the comments. And the videos she once used to build her image were turned into jokes. David tried to call me during those days. His messages grew more desperate with each passing hour. Shifting from anger to bargaining, he accused me of betrayal. As if I had broken the vows first. He begged me to stand by him, to remember the years we spent building Greenvolt together. But the truth was simple: he had already chosen Chloe, and the life of indulgence she represented. I had chosen myself, and I had chosen justice. Margaret Wilson stayed silent after her gallery faced IRS scrutiny. The family that once presented itself as untouchable now faced collapse on every front. For years, they dismissed me, treated me as an accessory to David's ambition. Now they were learning that the woman they underestimated was the one dismantling everything they had built. By the end of the month, Greenvolt belonged to Mason Energies. The gallery faced federal investigation, and Chloe's condo sat dark, stripped of furniture that had been repossessed as evidence. David, once the face of innovation, was now reduced to a man without a company, without an ally, and without the mistress he thought would secure his future. I didn't need to raise my voice or make dramatic speeches. My revenge was written in contracts, filed in courts, stamped in records. One transaction at a time. I had turned his empire into ashes. David believed he could build a future on lies and indulgence. I had simply shown him how fragile that future really was. When the sale of my shares to Mason Energies became public knowledge, the financial press didn't mince words. Every headline was a blade, cutting deeper into what little remained of David Wilson's reputation. Greenvolt founder ousted in Mistress condo scandal. From visionary to liability. His picture, once used on magazine covers celebrating entrepreneurs, now appeared with captions about fraud, vanity, and disgrace. The board's decision to remove David from leadership spread faster than the market updates. News anchors replayed clips of Chloe Carter's videos, freezing the frames where she gestured proudly to the condo that was never hers. Commentators dissected the timeline, tracing company funds to personal indulgence. By the third day, David was no longer a CEO in crisis. He was a national example of greed and carelessness. Margaret Wilson, once invited to every gala in Pasadena, now found herself shunned. Her gallery, once a place of whispered admiration, was under official investigation. Donors demanded refunds. Exhibitions were canceled, and reporters camped outside the gallery's glass doors. Margaret's face, which she had guarded with elegance and poise, appeared on local news with questions about tax fraud and misuse of charitable funds. The same people who used to kiss her cheek at charity events now crossed the street to avoid being photographed near her. For Chloe, the downfall was swifter and more humiliating. Without the condo, her online presence crumbled. Sponsors pulled contracts. Brands distanced themselves. And followers flooded her comments with derision. Clips of her sipping champagne in that condo were remixed into parodies. Her voice auto-tuned into mockery. She tried to go live one evening, crying into the camera, begging people to see her as more than the scandal. Instead of sympathy, the feed filled with laughing emojis. The internet doesn't forgive vanity when it's tied to fraud. David stayed quiet at first, but eventually the pressure pushed him in front of cameras. He gave a brief statement outside Greenvolt's headquarters, flanked by attorneys. His face was pale, his suit wrinkled. He claimed innocence, said the expenses were mischaracterized, and accused malicious parties of twisting the truth. The press conference lasted less than 5 minutes before reporters shouted questions he couldn't answer. By the next morning, his words were dissected by experts who called them hollow and evasive. The Wilson name, once carried like a badge of prestige, now symbolized betrayal and disgrace. In every article, my name appeared only in passing: his wife, Lauren Wilson, a corporate lawyer. I kept it that way on purpose. The spotlight belonged to them, not me. My role was never to become a headline. It was to let the truth speak loudly enough that no one could ignore it. When I walked past a newsstand that week, I saw all their faces lined up across the covers, David staring down in shame, Chloe crying behind sunglasses, Margaret with her lips pressed tight in denial. It was a gallery of downfall, curated by their own choices, and I, silent in the background, had arranged the exhibition. By the time Greenvolt belonged fully to Mason Energies and the Wilson Gallery had shuttered under investigation, I was already gone. I left Los Angeles behind without ceremony, carrying only a suitcase and the peace that comes when the noise finally stops. Seattle welcomed me with rain, the kind that washes the air clean and leaves the streets shining under gray skies. I rented a small apartment overlooking the Sound. From my window, I could see ferries moving across the water, steady and deliberate. They reminded me that forward motion doesn't have to be loud. It only has to be certain. My phone still buzzed with headlines: David filing for bankruptcy, Margaret facing subpoenas, Chloe disappearing from social media, but none of it reached me anymore. Their downfall was complete. My chapter with them was closed. In the evenings, I walked the quiet streets with a coffee in hand. Unrecognized, unbothered. I thought about the years I had given, the sacrifices, the tears that had dried long before the scandal broke, and I thought about how silence had been my sharpest weapon. Revenge had never required rage. It only required patience, truth, and the willingness to let go. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Your time and presence here mean everything. Subscribe to Revenge Ties to continue sharing in these journeys of truth and strength. Together, we'll uncover more stories where betrayal ends and dignity shines through.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.